Jack the Ripper, London's famous phantom serial killer. London, 1888. A mysterious figure haunts the backstreets of Whitechapel. In time, his crimes would become something of legend, but for now, he is simply known as Jack the Ripper. His victims never suspected such a monster could be real. His penchant for violence and insatiable bloodlust is like something England has never seen before. In this article, we're going to look at the Ripper's victims, the letters he sent to police and the numerous suspects who have cropped up over the years. Here's everything you need to know about Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper's victims. Jack the Ripper was officially only ever assumed to be responsible for 5 murders throughout Whitechapel in 1888, the victims of which were all sex workers. Given that crime against women was fairly rampant during this time, similar murders occurred, but many were not attributed to Jack due to different methodologies. Although an umbrella term of the Whitechapel murders was coined to categorize similar attacks, there are a variety of theories regarding whether they were all carried out by the same person. However, there exist the canonical 5 victims, all of which are universally acknowledged to have been committed by the same hand. Mary and Nichols. Mary and Nichols is the first of the 5 canon Ripper victims. She was an alcoholic prostitute who was 44 years old at the time of her death. In the early hours of the morning on August 31, 1888, Nichols's body was found on a roadside by a passerby. 5 of her teeth were missing, with additional cuts to the tongue. She had bruises along her lower jaw and to the left side of her face. She had severe lacerations to the neck and throat and an extended incision from jaw to ear. She had deep wounds along the lower side of her abdomen. Annie Chapman. At around 6 a.m. on 8th of September, 1888, the body of Annie Chapman was discovered in an alleyway. Chapman was sprawled on the ground with her dress pulled over her knees. Her killer had sliced open her abdomen, removed her intestines and draped them over her shoulders in a bizarre display of theatrics. An autopsy discovered that part Chapman's uterus had been removed. Her mouth and tongue were swollen, suggesting she had been beaten or strangled. The same slicing instrument had been used on both the throat and abdomen areas. The coroner was convinced that the perpetrator possessed some knowledge of human anatomy, fueling the speculation that Jack the Ripper could be a butcher, surgeon, doctor or medical assistant. Elizabeth Stride. On the morning of September 30, 1888, the body of 44-year-old Elizabeth Stride was found outside a working men's club in Whitechapel. When she was discovered by a steward at the workers' club, Stride was still bleeding from an open wound in her neck, meaning that she'd been killed only minutes before the discovery. In stark contrast to Mary and Nichols and Annie Chapman, Stride did not bear the hallmarks of a Jack the Ripper murder victim. While her throat had been deeply lacerated, post-mortem mutilation was absent. It's believed that the steward who discovered Stride had interrupted Jack mid-murder, meaning he was unable to finish the job in full. Catherine Eddos. Not only was Catherine Eddos the 4th victim of the canonical 5, but she and Elizabeth Stride were committed on the same day, most likely within minutes of each other. At 1:45 a.m. on 30th of September, the severely mutilated corpse of Catherine Eddos was found in an alleyway by a patrolling police officer. She had been killed by lacerations of the throat, the Ripper's usual method of inflicting death. Like Annie Chapman, Eddos's intestines had been removed and draped across her shoulders. Her upper body had been severely lacerated, including her face, ears, nose, cheeks, eyelids, shoulders, neck and arms. Fecal matter had been smeared across her body. A later autopsy on Eddos revealed something very strange: the killer had removed her left kidney. This fueled speculation even further regarding Jack's profession in the medical or butcher trade. Mary Jane Kelly. The 5th and final of the canonical victims, the murder of Mary Jane Kelly added a further layer of mystery to the identity and motivations of the man known as Jack. At the time of her murder, Kelly was only 24 years of age, pregnant, unconfirmed, and by many accounts, a beautiful woman. She was a prostitute by profession, and at the time of her death, she was living in poverty. On the morning of November 9, 1888, Kelly was discovered dead in her apartment by her landlord's assistant. She had been brutalized beyond recognition, suffering extreme mutilations, disfigurements and incisions which are considered excessive even by today's standards. Kelly's murder marked the first time the Ripper had killed in private, which may explain why he pulverized her to such extreme lengths. Other theories state that Kelly and the Ripper were acquainted somehow and that this was a personal attack. Jack the Ripper case letters. During the autumn of 1888, an estimated 1,000 letters were received by both the London Metropolitan Police and press regarding information, details and advice on the Jack the Ripper case. However, the majority were considered to be fake. But there were 3 letters in particular considered to be written by the genuine murderer. The Dear Boss's letter. First considered to be a hoax, the Dear Boss's letter was sent on September 27, 1888 to the Central News Agency in London and subsequently forwarded to Scotland Yard. Do you think you know a serial killer? Check out these 11 common traits of a serial killer and find out. The message was written in red ink and while the handwriting was largely competent, contained multiple spelling and punctuation errors. It was received just 3 days before the double murder. The message alluded to clipping the lady's ears off, which was a major significance. 3 days after the letter was received, the corpse of Catherine Eddos was found to have one of her earlobes cut off. The Saucy Jack Postcard. The day after the double murder on October 1, 1888, the press received further communication from someone referring to themselves as the murderer. This time it was on a postcard, which was not only written in the same red ink with the same handwriting as the Dear Boss letter, but also appeared to have specks of blood on it. Number 1 squealed a bit but couldn't finish straight off, being a reference to the fact that he was interrupted during Stride's murder, meaning he wasn't able to mutilate her to his intended degree. The From Hell letter. Received by George Lusk of the Mile End Vigilance Committee, the From Hell is memorable not just because of its mystery but because of what came attached with it. Along with the letter was a small parcel containing Catherine Eddos's missing kidney. The attachment of the kidney was almost conclusive proof that the From Hell letter was written by the genuine murderer. Tests on the kidney did confirm that it was of human origin and from the left side of a female. There were some most notable differences between the From Hell note and all previous correspondence from the killer, casting doubt on the legitimacy of all of them. The literacy level in the From Hell note was much lower than in other correspondence. It wasn't signed off as Jack the Ripper like the previous 2, and the handwriting was poor and almost childlike in its manner. Jack the Ripper suspects. Too many suspects, not enough bodies. That's the common slogan of Ripperologists the world over. Indeed, there have been around 500 individuals put forward suspected of being the Whitechapel murderer, some more plausible than others. Aaron Kaminsky. In 2014, an amateur Ripperologist claimed that he had conclusive proof that a Polish barber named Aaron Kaminsky was Jack the Ripper. The evidence came in the form of a shawl that once belonged to Catherine Eddos. The item was indeed genuine and was even still stained with Eddos's blood and the DNA of the person who murdered her. The amateur Ripperologist claimed that DNA tests on the shawl proved that Aaron Kaminsky had at least came into contact with it at some point, and was therefore likely to be Jack the Ripper. Kaminsky had a history of insanity and was already considered by London Metropolitan Police to be a suspect around the late 19th century. However, it was found that Kaminsky's family were tailors, and may have passed DNA onto the shawl that way. Sir William Gull. Possibly the most famous suspect, Sir William Gull was Queen Victoria's physician during the time of the Whitechapel murders. The theory states that Prince Albert, the heir to the throne, had secretly married and impregnated a shop girl. The baby was then placed into the care of Mary Jane Kelly, the Ripper's final victim. Gull and his fellow Freemasons are said to have killed prostitutes throughout London until they found Kelly and took the child. This theory would indeed stack up as to how the Ripper murders played out. The sheer overkill inflicted on Mary Jane Kelly suggests a personal connection between victim and killer, and it was unlike any other Ripper attack. Francis Tumulty. Francis Tumulty was a conman who posed as an Indian herb doctor in the US and Canada. Tumulty was in England during the Whitechapel murders and was known for acts of misogyny and charlatanism around the East End of London. Tumulty was forced out of his home in Boston after authorities accused him of malpractice with his patients and managed to avoid conviction. He then arrived in England in mid-1888 and was arrested again for homosexuality. Tumulty also boasted to his friends of having a collection of wounds from every class of woman in his possession. Unfortunately, while Tumulty was under suspicion of being the Ripper during his arrest, Mary Jane Kelly's murder took place, effectively declaring him innocent. Although after Tumulty's death in 1903, police discovered a collection of preserved fetuses in his lodging house. Conclusion: more than a century has passed since the Whitechapel murderer took the lives of London women and left a trail of blood, body parts and vital organs in his wake. Yet, despite the efforts of thousands of Ripper enthusiasts, we are still no closer to uncovering the truth. Is the Ripper's identity destined to remain a secret which no living soul will ever know? Will he be a phantom for the rest of time, a nameless silhouette in the shadows? Despite over 130 years of investigation, speculation and research, it's likely that the murders of Jack the Ripper will remain unsolved forever.